being recorded. There you
Okay,
go.
there it is. All right, well, then I'm going to make this announcement to any who are listening in. This is a meeting of the Expenses and Revenues Study Committee's Town Subcommittee, and John Doggett has just arrived, so we'll get him on board,
We'll have a quorum.
which is good. And with John Doggett, do we have a quorum?
It would be 3 of the 5 of us. I don't
Yeah.
see John on my, oh, there he goes.
Yeah,
Okay.
he'll be there just momentarily.
Hey.
So, hey, welcome, John.
Thank
Hi,
you.
John.
All right, and thankfully we do have a quorum. So we are going to proceed with the possibility of taking votes. And to set this up, Janet Gelbart, who's here at this meeting, along with Jesse Hefter, and with some help from other members of this subcommittee, have done a very thorough job of preparing a report of the town subcommittee to be then blended with reports from the school subcommittee and what's called the future subcommittee in the report of the committee as a whole, the Expense and Revenues Committee. And this meeting will involve a certain amount of discussion of any remaining additional information to be added or changes to be recommended to the town subcommittee's portion of this of the overall report. And Janet, may I turn it over to you to go through what you think are the major, both missing and, sort of still undecided items?
Yeah, John, do you want to do the minutes first?
That would be fine. Also, I'm going to assume that those who are here did receive copies of the minutes of our meeting.
The last 2.
Our last meeting, and also a updated revised version of the minutes from the meeting before that. And I'll take a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Janet Gelbart,
Yes.
John Doggett,
Yes.
and John Van Scoik votes yes. All right, thank you for that, Janet. And I'm going to turn the next parts of the meeting over to you.
Okay, well, I just received some information from Charlie that I haven't had a chance to look at, but it's more backup from what's already in the thing. I think one of the main things we asked for that we did not get is we wanted to know why there wasn't some money in the override request for roads. Should there be? We requested backup as to where we stand now, how much of a backlog, what the monies we have are able to do. Just some, what is the I never remember the right initials, the pavement condition index we're looking for, how we've regressed. Is there enough money to catch up? All of that, and we don't have that data. So since we need to make decisions now, I'm looking at John Doggett because he, along with me, voiced that. How do you want to proceed with this? Do we recognize it's not there and just make some comment, or do we say we can't vote our thoughts on the override request without that data?
I will say you should have it within the week, and I apologize for the wait on this. This is just, us we finally having capacity to do something other than the budget book, and we will get that to you ASAP. But yes, that data is coming. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that we were at capacity trying to beat that deadline, and now that that's passed, we will turn this around.
So the question I guess I would pose to the committee, and that I was trying to ask John, though I didn't get the words out right, is, are we comfortable saying, okay, based on what we've heard from town staff, or do we need to see the data behind it before we're willing to proceed?
I'm data driven, so I would vote for getting the data. But more to the point, Janet, how many other pieces are missing? Is this is just this one? We might have to make a sort of a workaround or an exception, whatever. I know we've got a time crunch on our hands. But on the other hand, how many other pieces are we missing?
Well, you
Um,
saw in the draft that I sent to you at the same time I asked for it to be posted, there's a couple of little data points that are inconsequential. What percentage was this? What percentage was that? Some backup information. I guess well, I don't know if we need the main piece not in the backup is the breakdown of the CDBG grant, which in addition to the funds for senior center transportation is funding. And I now have, I believe Charlie said four.
Exactly. Yep. 4 FTEs.
4 FTEs in the planning department. But that's pending sort of an overhanging, maybe we won't get this money. CDBG money has been around for I don't know how many decades, and under the new administration is tenuous. It doesn't affect this budget. It's something that Chaz and staff will have to deal with if it does go away. Some of my other questions are, again, I hope I can get the answers now. Wanted to talk a little bit about Charlie Simmons' memo, not because it impacts us, but I think I would like to propose that we talk about the town school partnership, not to resolve it, but more or less when we get to that part to recommend that some issues within it get resolved. And then I have little questions. How much of what I've seen marked confidential is now open? So that would mean, can you tell me what positions in finance that would be at risk if the override doesn't pass? What they are. I have been sort of dancing around what might go in planning, but at the AC, Chaz explained if there's no override, what goes in planning are those economic development positions. So just some clarity, so I'm not putting something out there. We were asked to go more slowly because we didn't want to get ahead of the town administrator. I don't know if I can now. And I don't know if others of you, who've all read what's there, have other questions about what is or isn't in the override, what we'd like to look at.
And I think, Jan, to answer your question, right, the list of cuts in a no override scenario is now public. What those, specifically what those positions are is still, a part of that is, in a no override scenario, we want to give departments flexibility to address this in order to minimize the damage to their operations, knowing that whatever we do, there's going to be damage to operations in a no override scenario. But for example, in finance's case, we've made a proposal to Lincoln, will you, in a no override situation, you're going to have to look at cutting two positions, to get to a number. And we've kind of gone back and forth on what those positions are. And I think as we approach, tax season and all the other things that we're trying to go through, I'm willing to bet that the final position on the table may change, which is, so it's not, we're trying to be evasive on this.
No,
It's
I
that
don't.
in some cases, departments are kind of gritting their teeth and saying, where if we have to make this decision, how will we make it? Where will we do the least damage? Some of these things are pretty set. For example, we know in planning, one of those economic development positions was, just doing ARPA 24/7, and
Right.
currently it's vacant. So it makes sense to cut either way. In the fire department, again, if we're talking about cutting up a position and we don't want to cut fire suppression, then fire prevention is really the only other department to look at. We're looking at something that was most recently added to the roster, which was the lieutenant position in fire prevention. So that would disappear. We have confidence on that front. It's on the others, it's just a matter of ensuring that the department and our team are in alignment on what that final cut is, when we
Yeah,
have to make
Chaz,
it.
I wasn't trying to get you to be overly specific. I mean, that's why I've sort of hedged my bets and was surprised
Yep.
at how public some of it was. But in
Yep.
terms of finance, and the reason I think it's important to know is to say what the impact would be. So I could say in the report directly out of the budget book, if if there's no override, then potentially there's going to be a company closed. It's 20 positions. In finance, I just don't know what the impact is. And that's basically what I'm looking for. What's the potential impact of 2 positions in finance going?
I would think you would see a significant, and I can give you a narrative, at least from
Yeah.
our end, right? You would see a significant degradation in service, particularly customer facing service. We would try to preserve the core functions of finance, tax collection, assessing, making payroll. But I think then in practice, people would see, the response rate when people have questions or concerns about taxes, people have, trying to, pay their bills and so forth. That's, it can already be a source of frustration in busy times. It would get significantly worse.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the complaint you hear about building, that inspections are slower, that people are waiting longer, and that part I understand. Okay, so that's a line to put in. Looking at my list. Yeah, I mean, I got a factoid from Lincoln yesterday, an advantage of attending those meetings in person, that even though you can't say this is the tax impact until you know what the select board approves, but it's $3.3 million per 1% increase in the levy is what he gave. If you added $3.3 million in an override, it would be the equivalent of 1% increase in the levy. And that's at least a metric that people can look at. And I think it's important in determining what is the difference if you get everything in the first year versus spending it over 3. I think Lincoln wants to speak.
Good morning. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I was actually speaking with a taxpayer who dropped in. At any rate, but I just heard the last part of your question, Janet, about what the impact would be to finance, and so I can quickly tell you that the projected impact right now would be a loss of public-facing staff in the assessing office, and in particular, helping taxpayers who are coming in talking about their asking questions and with forms on their residential exemption. It would be a degradation of service in the procurement division, the chief procurement officer's position. And so that's largely internally facing, but nevertheless very important in terms of complying with the state's procurement law. And also the loss of needed assistance in the payroll division, and having backup for when our payroll director is on vacation, which is needed occasionally.
Oh, yes, I remember those days well. I mean, I sort of went through everything on both the override list, the non-override list, whatever, with a fine-tooth comb, which I assume other members of the committee did. So those were my questions in terms of how to present a full report. Others?
I'm sorry, Janet, go ahead.
I was just saying, I don't know if others of you have other questions.
It's John Van Scoik. I have an underlying question, and I'm a little embarrassed that I have to ask this question. I'm embarrassed for myself that I haven't been able to fully figure this out yet. We start from a point of having been presented a budget, and the budget, tells us certain important things. And one of those that I keep coming back to is, okay, how many full-time positions are in the budget, and how does that compare to where we were? Let's say where we were last year, where we were, just before COVID, et cetera, et cetera. And Charlie Young has been very helpful in clarifying one point of confusion which existed because of a change in the way numbers are reported. But here's the other point, which from the very beginning of this process, I haven't been able to figure this out. Does this budget reflect everyone that is now on, I mean, every position that is in the current operating budget, or in our current operations, excuse me? Does it reflect everyone in our current operations in the 707 count of full FTE, full-time equivalents? Or does it start with this is what would be required to balance our FTEs against our revenues? And so the 707 isn't actually the current operating complement of all FTEs on the payrolls of the town. It's the baseline on which would be added a bunch of employees if we adopt the override. And so we don't, until we know how many employees would be added to that number via an override, we don't know what's being asked. We don't know whether it's more than the FTEs we had a year ago and 5 years ago or less. So can somebody just clarify that essential point?
Sure, John, happy to take that. So good question. The 707 includes all of the budgeted positions in a no override scenario. And that includes, obviously, we've talked about this, includes some grant funded positions, et cetera. But the 707 is what is shown in all the department budgets. And so it's the no override scenario. It doesn't show the plus FTEs for a yes override.
Okay. And so what would that number be?
I have that number, John. If you give me just a second.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I will pull that up for you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it
It's
be
a-
the 17.4 that gets cut if there's an override?
No, because that's
there are still
know,
some cuts in a yes override scenario. So this does require a little bit of quick
Right.
math.
Oh,
I think we
right.
don't have this in like quick order for you, John, because we don't necessarily know what the override proposal is going to be yet, but this is something we can make sure we get right for you.
Yeah.
Because it's the current number. If the override passes, it's the current number plus the 17 minus the cuts in a yes override, which is a few, and then any additions that are included in the override proposals, which I think it would be the 6 officers, maybe would be I don't think there's any additional FTEs.
no, so remember, we're making 5 cuts no matter what. We're reducing open positions and we are moving 2 positions to soft money. So there's 5 cuts even in a yes scenario. DPW is adding 5 employees, so that nets out to 0. The DPW is either adding the 3 employees and then bringing 2 sustainability positions that were on soft money onto the budget. So again, net of 5. The police department is bringing 6 back on, so that would be plus 6. The senior center transportation program would be a net of 1.3 FTEs, bringing the 0.7 of the transportation coordinator up to a 1.0, and then bringing a 0.6 position on to I'm sorry, and then bringing a I can't remember what the actual number is, but bringing that on full time, bringing a part-time assistant on to the operating budget from where it is now in soft money, and then a 0.5 for the town clerk. So 1.3, 0.5 is 1.8, so it's 7.8 would be the net increase.
Well, I think we're at a fundamental point of messaging here, Because, if a case is going to be made for an override, and maybe even a very substantial one, it's one thing to say we desperately need this override just to cling to the positions that we now have. Or if it turns out to be the case, what we're actually asking for is an override that will enable us to increase the number of positions overall, at the end of the year in terms of the FTE count. And I just think we need one way or the other, whether we think, we should do it or shouldn't do it, or how much, or, not how much. We got to know, are we going to be asking people to continue a trend of adding FTEs year over year to the budget? I will accept any, objections that we haven't actually added, year over year, every year. But are we at the end of the day going to be asking people for a complement of FTEs that is greater than the prior years and greater than the average of the pre-COVID years?
I don't
So I
know,
think
just, go ahead, Jeff.
I think it is a very good point around messaging here. And so I think if you actually break this down, and I apologize, it's 8.8. I left out the plumber. So the net FTE is 8.8. But when you consider what those positions are that are being added, if you go through them line by line, you start to see that it's not just numbers on a page, and that's why telling the story is important, to not just focusing on the number. So figuring out how to pierce through that, well, it's the number is king mentality that may be out there. For example, so 6 of those positions are police officer positions. The chief has been, the chief says we need those in order to reduce overtime, in order to make sure we have a full complement of employees. And those positions existed prior to this last contract. So it's, are we adding something that we didn't have pre-COVID? No. We're bringing back something that we lost, that the chief would like, to, really, as said, she needs to have in order to have a full complement of officers.
Yeah.
And then you look at, sustainability. 2 of those positions are there. They're just on grant money. So the question is, are we making that permanent? The 2 tree protection positions, again, town meeting passed the law. Town meeting, has said we want this. Okay. So it's stuff like that. But
Well, I think
you're right.
we're, as a result of this conversation, we're all coming to a common understanding of what's in front of us. But just to sort of underscore it for those who still don't quite get what I'm driving at, when I first looked at the budget that was presented to us just a week ago, maybe less than a week ago, I thought to myself, well, maybe we don't even need an override, because this basically says we have 707 full-time employees, under the town budget, paid for from general revenues. Um, and it's balanced. The revenues balance with what's needed for the 707 employees. So why would we even need an override if current operations balance out? But then it turns out, that really isn't the message of the budget. The message of the budget is, that might be true if not for the fact that the override itself would actually be, a request to increase the number of FTEs over what we now have, and we haven't yet sort of made that clear that we think we need more than we currently have, and we need the override to pay for the more. I just hope in going forward with our messaging, I hope we sort of make that clear in what we're doing here.
John, I tried in what I sent, as I said, this is what would be gone from the override, and in places it said more than. Not sure how to do it other than in words. And I believe, we would start out, and I have what's not written as conclusions and recommendations, and it could be made stronger there. But the budget that's in the budget book assumes there's no override. So it's not starting from now. It's starting from, this is how we would balance the budget going forward.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and
but it gives us a count of FTEs, which isn't the true count that we want to be enabled via an override. It basically just says that's what we would have to deal with if we don't get the override. Yeah. Well, how many employees fewer than what we are actually keeping on board right now is that? So that I can sort of, when I compare this year's FTEs to previous years, I'm dealing with a real number and not a number that's less than what's real, and only will be what's real if we, pass this override.
I think part of the
Or,
issue
I'm
is
sorry,
that,
only will be real if we don't pass this
right,
override.
yeah, but part of the issue is that the budget book reflects the balanced budget,
Yeah,
period.
I know.
And that, and
And one
so
response might
that's
be,
the seven,
why don't we just go with what's in the budget book now?
that's the 707.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
the, yeah, but
Right.
that's no
So-
override passes.
Right. So what that represents is a loss of is as a loss of 12.7 positions that are currently accounted for in the FY26 budget. That is a reduction, and it permanently eliminates the 6 police officer position. I'm sorry, it's 11.7. I'm sorry, it's 12.7, and it eliminates the 6 police officer positions that we were talking about that are now being held open. So, what that number is after the cuts have been taken. So, if what you're asking for, John, is how many people are currently on the payroll, or how many positions are currently accounted for on our payroll? It's that number. I'm sorry, it is 11.7. That number plus 11.7. So 707 plus 11 is 718. That's where we are now in FY26. And if there were to be no override, that number would go down because we would be eliminating, wherever possible, we would be cutting positions that are currently vacant. But we wouldn't be able to do that for everyone. I think there would have to be at least some layoffs, which again, not ideal. And there would be a significant degradation in service, which is what Janet was trying to get at in this question of what happens if there's no override. So yeah, I think on the one hand, right, we have to publish a balanced budget, and we can't assume an override. So that's what our balanced budget is. And then the question of what would happen if we went to work on that balanced budget. Well, that's the narrative that we're putting out there.
Yeah, but I've made my point, and I'll try not to just keep repeating myself. But in terms of analyzing our trends of hiring, adding positions to our FTEs, et cetera, which is the driver of why we need overrides, the 707 number is kind of useless because it doesn't really tell us what we would be using the override to attain. We would be using the override to attain a number, which I'm going to guess is some number higher than the year before and some considerable number higher than what was true pre-COVID. And so we're basically telling people we need these overrides in part because we've been adding positions, and people deserve to know that. But they wouldn't know it from looking at this budget because the number 707 that gets used to compare to prior year's FTE is a reduced number, significantly reduced number over what our actual FTEs would be with the override.
John, I disagree. Because to me, what's driving the gap are contractual obligations. The
Well, it's both,
contractual,
Janet. It's both.
look, can I finish? It's
Yeah.
contractual obligations that don't necessarily change FTEs. And, the big one being, health insurance, which, yeah, we'd like to change that, but it's a contractual obligation right now.
Yeah.
the contractual obligation in the fire department contract, in the police department. And the other thing, the new FTEs are coming from town meeting, either saying we want this, or
Yep.
the town deciding we need to do this, which is the sustainability green energy things.
Yeah.
So I don't focus so much on the body count, because the body count sometimes costs more or less depending on which bodies are being added. The ads, for example, the COA and the clerk's office are not high dollar bodies.
Sure.
And they're also, particularly in the clerk, if I understood it, we're paying that money out anyway, not as an FTE, but as part-time hours to get the job done. So I think.
But would you agree with me on this point, Janet, that the more people we add, the more we are adding to the unfunded health coverage and the unfunded pension liability?
No, because those are past year. Current year, when we hire a new person.
Well, all right. The
factoring
future year funding needs of of health insurance and
It won't,
pensions.
it won't be the big thing. So when we hire someone, if they have a $65,000 salary and $35,000 in benefits, Melissa's costing in, it costs $100,000 for that person. And we've already made up for all the years when we didn't count some of those future forward benefits.
Yeah, but you're certainly not
If you
saying that
add
FT.
staff, if you add staff, you're
Yeah.
increasing the cost of government. If you don't add staff, if your government is growing, if your needs are growing, you need bodies to do it. And part of
Yeah.
my issue with some of the town meeting things is not that they're not needed, but that there's this but it won't cost us more to do it. We'll get it from fees, we'll get it from here. And that's a lot of the pressure on the budget. We want these things. We support our firefighters, we support our
Yeah.
teachers. To me,
Well,
here's
here's what I've seen
happen.
here's what I've seen happening in some other communities, and everybody's aware that this is kind of like they call it a perfect storm. I think of it as kind of another, it's an influenza. It's a fiscal municipal influenza. But in other communities, one of the first things that is happening is somebody will say, we're going to immediately impose a hiring freeze. Which if the implications of that are that you will at least save the amount of money that you would have to spend if you continued to fill vacant positions, and how much is that money? How much does that help us? And then what are the impacts of doing that on our operations? That's a conversation I think worth having. But first you have to know, does the FTE that you're being presented as, what you're trying to achieve through the override actually undercount the number of employees that you're trying to achieve through the override?
Melissa has her hand up. I don't know if you see it, John.
So I just
Oh,
wanted to
yeah,
talk
please,
about,
I'm sorry.
A hiring freeze was something that we did discuss whether or not we would be imposing it as we were approaching this budget, knowing that we were building a cut list. What we ended up doing instead was creating a what we're calling the position review committee, which essentially, new hires already go through a process where Charlie is validating the request from the department. There's a requirement that all authorizations to hire for benefit eligible positions go in front of the select board. But this year, what we did was we added to that process a layer of me and the HR director engaging with the department head to discuss the viability of filling the position in the face of cuts that we were imposing. And so that is part of the reason why you're seeing the planning department have these vacancies that we are now putting on the list, is because we decided to purposely hold them open so that they would be part of the reduction list. Another example would be in the library. We had a position that just recently got authorization to hire. And, Michael did ask me, what's going on? Should we not be filling this? And I said, with the library, the reduction would be in part-time staff before full-time staff. And there's only 3 people covering this branch. So this 3 full-time employees. So this was a request that we felt like we could fill. So we are scrutinizing every single hire that is coming in front of the select board in lieu of a hiring freeze. But I do think that in the face of a no override vote, we would probably need to reconsider that position as well. But it was what we used in order to balance the budget. And I think, we were very careful and thoughtful about the positions that we did move forward during the course of the year.
Melissa, thank you very much for that explanation. And I think that adds to I know it adds to my understanding. I hope it adds to other people's understandings of what, this is all about. I would like people to at least consider the possibility that the conversation with the community about an override begins with, this is what a balanced budget with current resources would look like. And it's 707, FTEs, and we can all look at where they are. And why we are asking for an override is we need that money, if we are going to restore to the budget in front of you a bunch of positions that don't appear in the budget in front of you. And we'll start with the ones that we think are the most important to restore through an override and work our way down. And that will affect how much we're going to ask for in the override. To me, that would be so much more understandable than asking for an override when people look at the budget and it looks like it's already balanced. So, how can we even need this override?
So John, if I understand what you're asking, the write-up should start from that point, that the budget book assumes there's no override. It includes all of the cuts which are laid out in a previous section.
Yeah.
With an override, there would be some additions also laid out in a previous section. It can be summarized again, but not gone over in detail. And then we need to decide if we agree with it, putting in also that the town has held positions open, knowing this would be coming, has considered what it would do. And part of that is built into their plan for the override. Is that a good summary of what you just said?
I think so. John Doggett, what do you think?
I'm sitting here and I've got the report up on my other screen and listening to the conversation and trying to figure out, and I'm also, bear in mind, I noticed my name is in there for tasks for doing a summary, for which I foolishly volunteered. So here I am thinking, well, what is the bottom line here? And I tend to look at it through a voter lens. Now, bear in mind that it's a heart mind thing. I look at it through a voter lens, the resident lens. However, this document is really going to the select board to help them make a decision, I think, primarily. So this is really the real audience for this is the select board. And yes, of course, it's a public document and the public has a right to know that we've done this kind of work and all the detail behind it. So which helps the select board in terms of, let me use the word marketing, an override. The challenge I'm having is, and this discussion of headcount plays right into it. I'm looking at, I've got the chart up, and I think I requested it. I see it's in. That's great. Which has the dollars in it. Okay, going from FY 2019 to FY 26, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I did a quick analysis. So 3.5% per annum increase. Okay, which is like, well, that's sort of, if that was the only thing that's wrong, then we don't have a problem, because that's 3.5%. I'd love to see. I mean, single family homeowners. Typically, if you look at the budget book and look at the valuation, taxes have been rising 7%, 7 point something percent, so between 7 and 8% per annum for the last 6 to 10 years. I mean, it's a massive number. Now, same with multifamily. Condos haven't. Condos are the ones that have gone. I think my memory serves me right, about 4% over the period. So it depends. Again, this has different. There are different audiences looking at this, but each one of those audiences will want to know what is it driving. When we say this GIC is driving it, I don't buy that. It is going up and it's out of control, and that's really what I'm looking for. I say, where are we out of control? So there's a question here on the FTE budgets, which I see FY19 to 26. First of all, I'd like to see a series. I like a graph. So I like to see, is this a sort of a gentle increase, or is this a trend? And if so, and is it kind of, hockey stick kind of stuff? Because I think some people in town that I've talked to feel that the town's finances are out of control. And the question is there any evidence for that thinking? And when we look at FTEs increasing 3.5%, it doesn't sound to me like it's out of control. So for first question is that the only thing? So that this chart doesn't look like it includes overtime, question mark. I don't know, maybe Charlie can comment on that. And also the pensions, basically the 30% or whatever it takes to drive the pensions and other things. So if we're going to discuss FTEs, I think we ought to have all of that data. We got a lot of it, but not quite enough. I don't really want to ask for more, but we do need a little bit more. And I think that having a graph, which we've tried to do, I know I've done two, and this is just a comment, Janet. There were two charts that I sent. I thought I sent to Jesse and you, I thought, but only one of them.
All we saw, John, is the one that's in there, which was the revision.
There's another one, which is the levy.
That one I never got, and Jesse said he didn't either.
That's odd, because I prepared both of them, both on the same spreadsheet. I was trying to pull that out. I can send that to you.
Yeah,
which was only what we ended up doing was what I call a stacked bar presentation, because
that's fine. I'll
send it to you.
Yeah, I just want to say, in terms of what you're saying, the increase that the taxpayer feels isn't just the town side. So that's a piece of it, that a lot of the growth and everything else is the other side. The part that we don't talk about, that I asked Charlie for, where we started, is because the town has absorbed $2 million in cuts somewhere between COVID, restoration, and cost growth that isn't reflected. It was my decision not to show the month by month, which Charlie originally sent me, and I looked at it the year by year, and it was almost impossible to absorb. And I said, if I look at a chart and I don't understand it, how will the rest of the world? I am happy to send you that. I think I still have it, or Charlie must. But we collapsed the columns just to make it readable. And the problem is, it's not a straight line. It's, we cut here because of COVID. We added back because of this. We needed that. And it's a lot of trading between departments. We took this position, it wasn't here, we moved it there. So there were so many moving parts, it didn't seem to me to be valid. But if you
I just want to say, Lincoln's being very patient and has had his hand up. And I'm sorry, Janet, didn't mean to cut off your sentence.
No, that's fine. That's all I wanted to do was respond to John. And I'm sorry, Lincoln, I jumped ahead of you.
No problem at all. No, thank you, John. No, so I just wanted to, because I was a little distracted when I first came on and was trying to answer Janet's question. So I just wanted to be really clear, and I think in a way that I wasn't earlier, as part of this conversation regarding full-time employees and the reductions and the impact on the finance department, right? So it just as a snapshot, the finance department, right? So when we're the finance department doesn't have access to soft money, right? So those without an override, or if an override is not on the ballot, or a failed override, those are real people, right? Those are 2.5 full-time equivalent people who are doing work now, public facing or internally facing, but doing customer service day to day, who would be laid off, who will not work here. So I just want to make sure, that component is clear. I understand that the conversation about bringing employees who had been earlier, on quote unquote soft money onto hard money, but there are indeed absolutely layoffs of public facing people here, making sure we're following the state procurement law, making sure that people's residential exemption applications are processed and their questions are answered in a timely way, making sure that payroll happens correctly and accurately. So I just want to make sure, that's not lost in the conversation, in the other conversation about positions coming on general fund budget versus not. So that's all.
Yeah.
So if I can just jump in as well, John Doggett, to answer your question, the numbers you're seeing in that FTE sheet are just the salary budgets for each department. So again, it's just salaries. It does include overtime, but it doesn't include unfunded overtime, right? So the $800,000 deficit in fire is not there because again, this is the full total salary budget for each department. So it doesn't include benefits and it doesn't include pensions. And we can cast what that would look like, but I think Melissa can correct me if I'm wrong. We may not be able to provide exact numbers for total benefits costs by department. We, in section 2 of the budget, we have a page on the first, it's the first page of section 2 that basically casts, projects the cost of all benefits across all departments. And you can add that on to what you're looking at there. And you will see a dramatic increase in benefits. A reminder that we pay 83% of benefits costs and are going up 12% each year. And that 12% increase in FY27 is higher than the amount of money we're getting out of the levy in FY27. So in other words, just benefits are increasing more than the revenues we get from property tax by law. So that's just like to give you a sense of what is actually driving the costs here, right? And it is personnel. I think there's no doubt about that. 80% of the budget is personnel. But just to be clear, that is really where we're coming from. We're not settling contracts at 8-10%. And just to respond to John Van Scoyak's comments about sort of, we have a balanced budget here. We've heard this a few times at ENRSC over the past few months, and we as town staff and as a town legally cannot, publish an unbalanced budget, right? We must publish a balanced budget. And it would not, I don't think it would behoove us to publish a balanced budget that says we're going to put a hiring freeze in for the first 3 months of the year, particularly when all of those staff are going to cost the same amount the next year, right? So we as town staff are trying to do the responsible thing here and say, okay, if we need to meet the deficit, this is how we're going to do that, right? We're not proposing irresponsible, use of one-time funds, getting out costs, etc. We have to do that. And so we have to put together a plan that's balanced. But to add to what you're saying, John, right? You're saying, look, we have a balanced budget. Why don't we just go with that? That's not totally true. You have an $800,000 deficit in fire overtime that is not going to be funded if you don't pass the override. And that will mean some kind of reduction, right? It will either mean having to reduce other departments in order to meet that, or it will mean having to do something else, a change in fire operations in order to reduce that overtime, right? And this is why Chaz says that the narrative is important, because it really tells you what's going to happen if the override doesn't pass. You can't really see it in raw numbers, right? Further, you'll have an unfunded $900,000 tail of the fire contract that will need to be dealt with. That's 20 FTEs, right? That will actually be reduced. So we're not talking about a no override scenario. We're adding employees. We're talking about a no override scenario where it's basically minus 40 FTEs, right? You have a sustainability division. All of the employees except for one in that division will go away. And so again, you can say you have a balanced budget here and the 707 is nothing's going to, you're not going to lose anything, right? You can just pass this. But in reality, you're talking about well over $2 million in services and FTEs that will go away in a no override scenario. And so it's not truly a balanced budget, right? It's the best we can do and what we're legally required to do to balance the budget. So I just wanted to color the conversation a little bit because it is a balanced budget, but we have to produce a balanced budget. We don't have another choice. And we do that by making responsible trade-offs and decisions. And that's what you see in the 707.
John, I just want to point out it is almost 10. We had originally said 10:30, maybe later, but maybe we should see. I mean, we've talked about questions for how the override and what goes into the narrative. That's our deliberation. Other than this, I had a note to myself that I'd like a little bit more clarity on what happens in 2030. I don't know if other people have other questions. We still have looming we didn't get the data we wanted on the roads, and we're gonna have to decide, do we want to vote on things? If we don't vote on things, how do we meet our deadlines? In terms of what we're able to present to the full committee, because of the fact that they meet the day before we do, and that sets everything back a week. So just want to throw that out and decide how we're going to go forward from here.
On
Well,
that last point, Janet, excuse me. Is it something we can consider trying to move our meeting so that we're ahead of the main committee? Sounds
We
like
would, I mean, I would have to, one, I don't know people's availability. Two, it gives us very little time to, we can, and then there's other deadlines, in which case I might ask people to take on a little bit more of the writing. I'm just looking at how much I'm going to be able to get through, because it has to be published.
yeah.
You
Okay.
know, that's the thing. So if we're meeting Tuesday, it basically, we need to get everything. If we want it, I guess we could post the final thing Monday. Doesn't give a lot of time for writing, reflection, whatever else, but certainly we'll do what we have to.
yeah. Sorry, I don't have very much to say that's helpful, I'm afraid. Because I keep thinking, I keep in mind that the ultimate product is the report of the committee as a whole. And in other words, you can't have a town, subcommittee report that's at variance with the school subcommittee, and both are at variance with what the committee as a whole reports. And it's when we get to that stage in the process that we will make all the meaningful decisions as to, how to phrase this, how to phrase that, what our bottom line is in terms of our recommendation. And it could be our recommendation is, that there should be a proposed A and a proposed B and a proposed C, based on somewhat different interpretations of how the town should respond to this ongoing problem. But we're not there yet, and I've never thought that the responsibility for making that decision rests on this subcommittee.
Well,
It's going to rest on the committee as a whole.
I agree with you, John, but my understanding, and the two other chairs have contacted me in Jesse's absence, but my understanding is that the committee needs to see from us what we think of and recommend of the town's piece.
Yeah.
And that has to be there, that they've asked for what we haven't done until now, which is, what do you think? And I think this has been one of the better discussions we've had. My question is, well, one, and I would like to hear a little bit more about 2030, because we do need to say, even though Chaz says there's no promises, this will never happen again, he's made some comments about why he thinks there might be a little bit of light. And I just want to make sure I understand those, and those are in the report.
we can all use some light right now. Yeah.
And other than that, I don't know if I have any other questions. And then I
Janet,
think
can I answer your question, just because I feel like it's unfair to you that we've left you kind of in the dark on that, and I don't want that to necessarily continue. From my point of view, and John can agree or disagree, I think what we need from the town subcommittee report is an answer to the question why we are where we are. Okay.
I think that's already in what we've written.
Right. So, no problem there. It's already there. And then secondarily, what our options are for going forward, given where we are and why we are where we are. That's all.
All right, and all I'm trying to say, I said, I propose, these are the things I think we need to vote on, which
Yeah.
is, do we agree with what's in the override? Yay or nay? And our arguments back and forth to reach that conclusion. Do we agree on the format that Chaz has put forward?
Yeah.
I'm blanking on my own things. Do we want to say anything, which is sort of a big question mark because we didn't get the data about the big thing not in there that we talked about, which is more improvements to the roads.
Yeah, I would definitely like that because I think strangely enough, one of the scenarios is maybe we actually should be asking for something that isn't yet in the
Right.
ask. Yeah.
And then, but if we did that, then there's an issue of the numbers. Whether we think, in addition to the how much each year goes in an override, do we want to opine on whether it should be one ask, whether it should be separate ask for the town piece and the school piece, whether it should be some other permutation? And then I would like to talk a little bit about if we want to say anything on the town school partnership, only because it reflects how things are perceived, and that's a separate discussion we haven't started yet. So are we ready to vote on any of those?
I don't think we are, but John, do you think we are?
No.
So
No,
where
okay.
do we go from here, given our timeline? Because we have to report something out.
We can rush.
Yeah,
the data.
Chad, go ahead.
So we can try and rush as much as best we can the data on pavement management. You know, we have that. The DPW team has that. So Charlie and I will talk to Aaron and Kevin and their team and get as much of that as we can because they track that information. And you know, we can try and do some follow-up there. So if you want to meet on Tuesday and we can try and get you that, you know, as much information as we can over the weekend or on Monday so that you have time to review, and maybe we can try and bring Aaron or Kevin here to have a discussion about that.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that.
What are people's schedules on Tuesday?
I just grabbed my phone. Let me turn it on. Yeah, I can meet on the 24th. That's Tuesday.
I've got to check the town meeting calendar just to make sure. Hey, and while I'm doing that, Charlie Young, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding that I think what you're doing here is great. I really do. I mean, I've loved the conversation you and I have had, and I think we're getting closer to an understanding of how to put these numbers in front of people in a way that's analyzable and you know, and easily understood. And in that, excuse me, with that as the preface, I'm about to ask for one more thing, which is, I think a really important part of that is distinguishing between what are the tax revenue funded parts of our government and what are the, you know, other revenue funded parts of our government, so that we know what we're talking about in terms of just purely the growth in the part of the government that is going to necessarily impose additional taxes on, you know, property taxpayers. Because, you know, all of that other stuff, the stuff that's grant funded, if it doesn't impact how much an override would have to amount to, you know, and how much that would impact taxpayers, it's a good thing to know, but it isn't necessarily that relevant to these considerations of is the fundamental problem some combination of ongoing additions of FTEs and the implications of that for our pensions and our group health.
So I think that's helpful feedback, John, and we'll talk internally about how we can meet you at that request, right? I will say the salary budgets, the departmental budgets, the budget book, other than that FTE page, right, reflect the dollars that are being supported by the revenues of the town, right? In other words, if you see that the DPW budget has gone up by X amount since 2019, that's real dollars supported by the revenues of the town, right? The only
Yeah.
place we're showing the soft funded FTEs is on the FTE tables, and then some departments there is an offset in their budget. It's a negative number, but in reality, the bottom line of the set of each department's budget is just what is on, local receipts and tax revenue, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess I'll circle back with Chaz and Melissa on whether there's a better way to respond to your request. So I guess I'll just say I'll take that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I don't have any conflict on Tuesday, and I don't think John does, right?
No, I've was going to be on vacation, but now not. So not because
Yeah.
of this, but
I was gonna say, so-
other things going on.
So
Yeah.
same time, 9 a.m. I'm
That-
looking at the town staff. I don't know. We all said we can do it.
I can make that.
Yeah. 9 a.m. sounds good to me.
I'll be off, but they're more than capable of handling it in my absence.
Does that work for you, Charles and Charlie?
I should be able to make it.
Yes, I can make that work.
Okay, if we're not doing that, I'd like to talk about the other two things. One is walk me through 2030, because I think it's important, because people are saying, yeah, and then what? As part of their feedback. So I briefly chatted with Charlie about this yesterday, and I went back and I looked at the numbers again. And so the decrease in the pension commitment that's projected is more than I thought it would be. And then speaking of charts, that interest chart, it took me forever to find, this is the line he's talking about. The interest payment goes down, because I was looking at numbers that go up. So it's back to what we were talking about, seeing numbers that speak to us in ways that we can understand. But that was about a mil. So I came up with a $4.8 million total between the two. And that would be decrease in expense, really, but we'd see it as more money that's spendable. Is that also something that goes through the split, so that
Yes,
so that would be, if those numbers hold up, 2.4 million available for the town to spend
yep,
in other categories, and that's pretty close to the deficit you're looking at now.
correct.
Okay, so then that makes sense to me as being a light at the end of the tunnel, instead of something like he's seeing something I don't. Are there other things, and we're not looking at expenses to go down in that period?
No,
So it's just that we're spending less on those two big categories. Okay, that's helpful. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the split, unless people have other clarifications that they need. So both what I would hear last year as people were running for school committee and dealing with the horrendous gap in their budget, there was a comment, but the town was going to give us more money, and then they cut it. And I asked Melissa what that was about, and she said the health insurance costs had gone up more. And in your presentation at advisory the other day, it was the same thing. We haven't reduced what we're giving them, but that's how they see it.
yep,
And so on the school side, in addition to seeing an expense as revenue, because that's how it flows through to them, they're not really seeing what else we've talked about here, the full cost of that employee. That once they get the pot of money, they're not spending the full amount that it costs them for bringing on an employee, and they have full reign over how they use it. The other thing that we talked about was in those recent memos from Charlie Simmons, you put something in the override to buy him a plumber, and in the same memo, he was asking for 1.3 million from the schools. And my reaction to that was, how on earth do they do that? They can't even do what they have now. And a lot, again, goes through how those negotiations are handled. And what hardly gets discussed, but also is an impact, is how fees work through. What fees really belong to one side or the other in terms of services covered. And I always forget the one Melissa mentions on the town side, but what struck me in our early discussions with the schools was, yes, they do get Medicaid money or other insurance monies, but those are split, and that doesn't make sense to me. So what I would like to propose we include, and I can share, maybe Tuesday, the language. These are issues we raised in committee that neither the town staff nor the committees have had the time to fully explore, but to put forward something that says these are the reasons we think that the select board and the school committee and town staff, whatever, through the town school partnership, really look closely at those things so that there's an equitable expectation on both sides. And sometimes that's new agreements being forged, but clearly Charlie Simmons and Bella need to come into budget discussions with a common understanding of what that might mean. And how it works through, and the same thing on staff. I mean, to me, it's, whether you tell me I have $100,000 less to spend because of health insurance, or 100,000 more in revenue, but it doesn't always wash that way because of how the budgets are worked. So I think it's important that it get the consideration that it needs, but that it should be part of our recommendation that it get done. And I don't know if people think you need to put a date specific on it, as some of our colleagues have done in the full committee, because I from all the questions that I have asked Melissa and her staff and Chaz, they have other jobs to do. We can't always get what we want when we want it. So deadlines we think are easy to meet may not be, and I leave that up to the committee to discuss.
Can I jump in on that real quick? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
I think that, the town school split has been something that we've been talking about for several years. And I do think that part of what needs to happen is the collaboration between the schools and the town on the best way to apply the split and how to change it going forward. The last time it changed was when Mary Ellen and I were able to put recommendations in front of the town school partnership for how to change it based on the recommendations that were coming out of BFAC. And so in order to be able to change it going forward, that town school partnership and the collaborative environment needs to be there, because there's no point in me trying to make a recommendation on how the split should change if there's not kind of a partner on the other side that can then agree or disagree and then have a compromise on what we think the best way to implement a change that is presented in a fair way for both town and schools. So I do think, they had some capacity issues. And then I think that going forward, we really do need the town school partnership to be the vehicle in order to be able to provide, recommendations for how to change it.
Yeah, and I apologize. My meeting that I thought they might have forgotten about is here, but I'm more on this to come. But yes, happy to talk through this on Tuesday. Apologies.
Yeah, and all I was proposing, Melissa, is that those discussions happen, that we think that part of the deliberations of this committee is we really think it's important that they happen for these reasons. And it wasn't something that we ignored. We just couldn't, given the constraints on staff and on us to reach any sort of conclusion. And I don't think we were headed, if that subcommittee continued working, to any other conclusion than we really think you need to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we started working on it in October, but then, without the ability to have an engagement, it really didn't make sense to continue, tweaking it.
And that's why I'm saying I'm not sure that we're the ones to put a time limit on it, because it's a question I raised at many of the things that came up at the full subcommittee. Are you sure there's capacity to get it done? Are we asking something that we know we won't be able to get done? And so I will, if the committee agrees that they think this should be in our report, I am happy to put the language together and we can review it on Tuesday.
John, do you agree?
Yeah.
I agree too. And furthermore, excuse me, given that Chaz has been pulled into a different meeting, I think we've probably done enough for today and should adjourn. And Janet, is that,
It's
does that
fine.
sound right to you?
I would just recommend that we all think very hard, even though we don't having the hard thing about this whole process is not having the numbers that we're talking about. But I think we can think about whether we think 5.3 million, even if we disagree with what's in it, is the right amount, or if we think it should be higher or it should be lower. And I think we can think about whether we agree with the take it all now and establish a stabilization fund, and whether or not we agree or have any recommendation on how it actually appears on the ballot. One question, two questions, any other things. We should think about those things so that we can have a really good discussion on
Yeah.
Tuesday and reach some votes. I think that
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is, as I
I
said, the
agree.
best discussion we've had to date.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. All right, then, we will adjourn until Tuesday at 9, and I'm assuming Nicole will make sure to check in with other members as to their ability to attend Tuesday
Yeah,
at 9.
John, you just need to get her an agenda, and I don't know if the same
Yeah,
agenda we've been using
I'll
is accurate, is adequate.
yeah. And others are invited to just sort of shoot me an email suggesting an item for the agenda or how to word it, et cetera. Great. I don't think we agreed on who would do the minutes for this meeting.
Oh, no,
I'm happy to.
I had said that I would at the last
All
meeting
right.
because I'm writing all of this up anyway, and I will continue to write of the things that you've already seen, questions, add this, subtract this. Otherwise, I'm going to take that red line, make it a black line, and send a new thing with red line on the things that have changed so
Excellent.
that it's easier to
Excellent.
read.
Thank you as always. Thank you to all the staff who attended, and I hope they found this helpful as well. See you all next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.